It soon transpired that Richard Allen had lived alone since his mother had died the previous year, which may have explained the house, but she'd been a wealthy woman in her own right. A talkative woman neighbour soon dispelled this suggestion. Mr. Allen's mother passed away at the young age of 51, and her last few years had been spent in considerable pain. She died of a rare form of cancer, and her devoted son had taken her to the United States on at least 2 occasions to undergo expensive medical treatment. That may also explain why he's on holiday in the States. Perhaps he'd like the place and decided to go back there, except that his mother had been treated at a private clinic in Florida, which was a far cry from the crowded, polluted and none too tourist-friendly Big Apple. South quickly pieced together a conspiracy theory and decided it may well hold water. The tourist, who was obviously living beyond his means, had been approached by someone to do a favour for an American connection. He had been briefed, flown to New York, and had followed the professor around until he had gone to the job. Extraordinary as this story sounded, South could think of nothing else that fitted, except that maybe the professor was indeed a faggot, but this seemed highly unlikely. South was tempted to call Allen's office, but decided against it. He realised that he'd probably done all he could here, and that ideally he should confront the man himself. All the same, he couldn't get the idea out of his head that he should take a closer look at Allen's house. Maybe he'd find further clues there, like a cheque for $50,000 drawn on the account of David Rockman, he thought to himself, half sarcastically. Although he had already dismissed the idea as foolhardy, he knew he'd have to return to the Allen house and break in, whatever the consequences if he were caught. Halfway to Manchester Airport, he turned his hard car around and, pulling up at a garage to buy some tools for the break-in, Colonel Oscar South began a new career at the age of 41, as a burglar. Considering he'd never done anything like this before, he was surprised at his prowess. He simply parked the car in the driveway, walked up the front of the house, took a quick look around, then walked around the back and forced entry through the French windows. Anything could have happened. There could have been someone staying in the house, there could have been a guard dog, there could have been special security devices, a police patrol car could have been making a routine check and caught him in flagrante delicto. But his luck held, and he was soon in the house going expertly through the drawers and cupboards in search of anything least incriminating. Exactly what he hoped to find he wasn't sure. He soon came across 2 items which gave him food for thought. One was a privileged credit card for the Rothschild Bank of Frankfurt. The other was a photo album. South had heard of the privilege card. It was a special charge card issued by several of the leading American and European banks to its most valued customers. In the United States, most valued meant anyone earning over $200,000 a year. He had no idea what was the limit for British holders, but he figured it couldn't be much less. And certainly it would be way over the head of a humble chartered accountant. If the privilege card were a mystery, the photo album was bizarre. It contained a lot of ordinary photographs, including family shots, and some which were obviously the owner's late mother. But most of the others were of men, older men, and they were every single one of them either nude or semi-nude. South scooped up the album and the privilege card, switched off the bedroom light and descended the stairs in the dark. Putting the card in his wallet and the photo album in his case, he drove back to the airport and waited patiently for the first flight the next morning, wanting to sleep but totally unable to close his eyes. When he arrived back in New York, he sealed the card and the photo album in a reinforced envelope and addressed it to himself at the White House, then dispatched the parcel by a courier and took it up to NYPD headquarters. When he arrived, his friend was just about to go off duty. South asked him what had happened to Richard Allen. Had he told his story to the tabloid press, gone to ground or what? No, Oscar said Captain Eflin. I think he's staying at the same hotel. The press know where he is, but no one's shown any interest. Isn't that a bit strange? The captain shrugged his shoulders. Women are raped every day in this city. Every hour there are occasional sexual assaults on men too. They would be interested in some fag academic. South nodded his head, obtained the name and address of the complainant's hotel, and decided to get a few hours sleep before he confronted him. He checked into a modest hotel, rang the White House to get the latest update in the world position, and after showering, slipped gratefully between the sheets. That evening he took a cab to Richard Allen's hotel and inquired at the reception desk. Is he expecting you, sir? Asked the receptionist. No, replied South. Who shall I say is calling? It's a confidential financial matter, replied. I wonder if I might speak to him myself. He gave her his most seductive smile and she handed him the phone as she dialed the extension. The tired voice answered and South said, Mr. Allen? Yes. My name is South and I'd like to talk to you about some mutual friends. Who is that? He asked. South, replied South. Oscar South. No, said the voice. I mean, who are the mutual friends? It concerns your account at Rothschild, Mr. Allen, South found himself saying. He had to admit that detective work was not his forte, neither was tact, We had thought about this on the flight and decided the direct approach would work much better than beating about the bush. It certainly hit a nerve, because the voice on the other end of the line now sounded extremely wary. "What about the bank?" it asked. "We know you've done some work for them, sir." "Work?" "Yes, we've seen your photograph album." This was the moment of truth. If South was barking up the wrong tree, he'd soon find out, and if he overstepped the mark, he'd find himself in serious trouble, perhaps from attempted blackmail as well as burglary. Oh yes, I understand," he said. "You'd better come on up." South knocked on the door, and it was answered at once by a tall, powerfully built man of about 30. "Mr. South," he said in a confident voice, "please come on in." "It's Colonel South, actually," said the clean-shaven man in the three-piece suit. South cut a rather fine figure and looked very businesslike. But if he looked it, Richard Allen certainly was. Jumping the gun, he said, "I didn't think that Allen would have a job for me so soon." He closed the door and asked if he could order him a drink. "No, thank you," he declined politely. "Who showed you the photos?" he asked. This was not what the Colonel had expected, and he stalled for time. We've known about them for some time." "Yes, I suppose. I didn't really like the idea of stitching up that little trap. What's his name?" "Maloney," South put in. "That's right, it's not my scene, public toilets. I'm a respectable person." Of course. It was only that no one else was available, and they said they needed someone from out of town to do it. "They?" "You know, Rocky." South's heart missed a beat. This could only have meant Rockman himself. "This is the first time I've ever done anything like that. Usually I meet my victims discreetly." "You do?" "Of course. There's never any need for the photos to get into the papers. Most people would rather die than have that happen. Unless it's with a woman." "A woman?" "Yes, they've got a couple of girls who work for them too. But I expect you know that." "Who's the muff this time?" he asked nonchalantly. South ignored the creeping sensation which ran up his spine and put his arm around Alan's shoulder. "Richie," he said, "how would you like to have dinner with the President of the United States?" Although South had been reading conspiracy literature for months, much of it bordering on the lunatic fringe, even he was surprised at the full extent of the network, how it had penetrated every avenue of government and banking, and how it controlled all the major foundations and think tanks. James Hunter was a born sceptic, so he took a lot of convincing, but his scepticism had faded somewhat in recent months, even more than it had since an alien had landed on his front lawn. And if the truth of this matter sounded bizarre, strange in fiction and too terrible for a third-rate B-movie horror script, the facts all pointed in the same direction. Conspiracy theorists had long claimed that the banking dynasties of Rothschild and Rockman had been locked in a fierce struggle for control of the world economy from the 19th century. Now South had ascertained that, rather than being competitors, the two great financial houses were collaborators. Ownership of the A stock of the Federal Reserve System seemed to be totally interlocked between the main Rockman-controlled banks in the United States, the mainly Rothstein-controlled banks in Europe, and a sprinkling of others elsewhere. At first sight, the whole network looked totally independent, but the truth was that the degree of financial control and power concentrated into the hands of two families made them the most powerful force on earth when acting in unison, as they frequently did. Richard Allen had been quite a windfall. Not only had he been extremely talkative, but he appeared to be on first-name terms with all the major players. He was not only an accountant, but a promiscuous homosexual who had been employed on numerous occasions by powerful people within the Rothschild Empire to ingratiate himself with key politicians, academics and other policy makers. There were other people who did similar and often complementary work. In particular, there were a number of young women who were employed on the same basis, and there were people who specialised in entrapping their victims in other ways. One man, for instance, sponsored academic research to a sophisticated publishing scam, who would turn them out of the blue, praise his intended victim's work to high heaven, commission a book from him, in the process of which he would lure him onto the board of a company, which would then become embroiled in serious financial irregularities. The price of the academic's bailout would, of course, be total obeisance to his mysterious benefactor.